By the end of this tier list, we will be finding out who the hardest monster in Monster Hunter Wilds is, all the way up from GG's, you see him, you're absolutely cooked, down to you could literally be blindfolded and cook that monster, no problem. Now, I'm going to try to take this into context and when you're supposed to fight them, and then also mix in what they're like on their 5 difficulty tempered versions of that monster at endgame, if there are. And then on top of that, this is also going to be different if you used a different weapon than me. I used a longsword. Please don't cook me. I've been using a longsword since PSP, okay? Back when I was before middle school. However, it might be easier or harder for you, for example, if you're using a great sword or if you're using a longbow, for example. That's going to be different and might have obviously easier or harder bosses there for you than it was for me with the longsword. Now, getting started here, we have the Guardian Ebony Doron. And this is going to be, for me, a very good starting point at mid. And this is going to separate some of the harder in GG's from the easy and the absolute blindfolded wins. Because in a lot of ways, he is a little bit difficult in the sense that he has a lot of very frantic movements, jumping around super quickly. Sometimes it is a little bit hard to read his attack patterns until you have fought him a couple of times. But I don't think he does enough damage or really cooks you enough to where you're going to be carding very often. I don't think I ever carded when I was fighting the Ebony Guardian Doron. So we're going to keep him at mid. I think he was a little bit harder in previous games. Granted, all of these little sections would be harder monsters in previous games. There's nothing in this game that's going to come anywhere close to, I think, at least Monster Hunter pre-Worlds. I think those were a little bit harder based on a lot of different things. However, the GGs in this game, like I said, are going to be easier than the GGs in previous games. But I think he is a very good start point to put him at mid here. Now, next, the Doshaguma. Now, I think for me personally, he was relatively easy. I don't think he really presented me a challenge at all, especially with how much I was cooking his weak points, jumping up in the air, slamming down, spinning in circles, just doing an insane amount of damage to him. Spamming my R2 triangles with the longsword and just cooking them in seconds. He really didn't hit me more than like a couple times in the whole fight, and it was a little bit underwhelming because of that, because I thought it was going to be a little bit harder. I'm actually going to put him in easy. I actually think he's easier than the Guardian Ebony Doron. Next we have Gravios. Honestly, we're going to put him as harder. Granted, you fight him in endgame. However, based on even in endgame when you fight him, his moveset is just a bit harder. The fog and poison cloud that he puts on the ground, he's a little bit annoying when he shoots that fire onto the ground right under you as well, and you get kind of just absolutely destroyed by that, even though you don't think you're going to get hit by that. He does a good amount of damage. You have to pop a lot of times those cold potions while you're fighting him, which can get a little bit annoying if you forget to do that and your stuff is just going down. On top of that, you do have to break down his armor a bit before you can start to do damage, so you're not doing a lot of damage right at the start of the fight until you do that, or at least for me with the longsword, it took a little bit to do that. You kind of had to slice up his belly for a while, which opens you up to a lot of those right around him attacks. So we're going to put him, he's definitely not hard. I don't think he's ever made me faint a single time, but we're going to put him at mid, and I do think he's harder than the Ebony Doron. So now we have the Guardian Arkveld. So the one down here is the normal Arkveld. Obviously, you got the Wyvern Milk. We love the Wyvern Milk. We love the Wilks. We're going to put him, I think you fight him right at the end of the base version of the game before you get into the end game. Obviously, the normal Arkveld you fight as the final boss. This is the second to last boss in that base game. We're going to put him at hard because I think he's definitely harder than these bottom monsters. He's definitely not a GG's. I mean, obviously, if you fight like a Guardian Arkveld at a higher difficulty or something like that, it's going to be a lot harder, but that's mainly like the tempered Arkveld 5 difficulty is kind of down here that we'll go through later. So we're going to put him at hard. He's the first, I think, boss that I did faint on. I did faint one time on him. I did faint on a couple other bosses at least once. However, he just has moves that once you learn them, it's a lot easier. But when you're just getting slammed down with his chains and thrown around and he's picking you up and you're trying to just cut his hand off and he's just absolutely cooking you at points, we're going to put him there because when he does get a little crazy, the fight gets a little crazy and he can do some major damage, especially where you are at that point in the game. So we're going to put him at hard. I don't think he's definitely not GG's. You can probably beat him your first try. If not, you learn the moves, beat him a second or third try, no problem. But any Monster Hunter veteran is definitely going to be able to beat him on the first try. Now we have the Balahara. I honestly think he is harder than the Doshiguma for me, but he's extremely easy. I mean, he's very easy. So he's the boss that is going to start off doing a lot of environmental stuff. He's going to cause that big, insane, really cool looking little whirlpool in the sand, which I absolutely love fighting him for that. He uses a lot of the environment to kind of slither his way like a snake up there and shoot things down at you. He'll hit you every once in a while. He's going under and popping up and shooting stuff at you as well. So in general, he's a pretty fun fight. I like how he does a lot of environmental type of stuff, but he's definitely not hard. I don't think he's ever fainted me one single time, and I probably don't think he ever will. So even where you fight him very early on in the game and the late versions are both extremely easy, we're going to throw him right there. Ooh, here we go with the Octopus Boys. Okay, Octi Boy number 1, we have the Zuwu. The second Octi Boy you actually fight, but the first one we're doing in this tier list. This Octi Boy, because he is new to Monster Hunter in general, new to the Monster Hunter franchise, I am actually going to put him in the bottom tier of mid. Now, granted, when you fight him, does he feel easier probably than the Doshiguma and the Balahara? Yeah, he probably feels a little bit easier. However, I think he's harder the first time you fight him versus when you fight him later on, because you still have to get used to a brand new moveset we've never really seen in any game before. We've never seen this Octi type of monster in general. It does feel really good when you're cutting up all of the different tentacles too and absolutely whooping his ass later on in the game. But we're going to keep him at the bottom part of mid. I think that's fair. I think now looking, the Doshiguma's probably harder than the ball. But we're just going to keep it the way it is. We're going to keep it the way it is. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. With the longsword, this is how I feel. Next, we have the apex predator of the Windward Plains. One of the greatest fights in the entire game. Railgun lightning boy himself, the Ray Dow. Woo! You know what? Is he harder or easier than Guardian Arkveld, man? I think he's probably a tad easier. I think he's probably a tad easier. Now, don't get me wrong. He will do some damage to you. This is not, by any means, this is not an easy fight. But I think when you look at the, even like the tempered version, I feel like he's still pretty easy. I never really had a problem with the Ray Dow. He definitely will make you faint a few times, but I don't think he's cooking you where you have to restart the whole fight ever. I don't think he's going to do that to you. He does have some pretty big damaging moves, especially with his lightning moves, especially with that railgun he's hitting you with. He's flying around, cutting you up with his wings. I think he's more of a cool, intimidating fight versus when you actually fight him, how hard he actually is. I think specifically with the longsword, I can stay on him and I can pretty much continuously cook him, knock him over, and do some big damage to him to where I do beat him relatively fast. So we're going to keep him at right there. He's not, I don't think, as hard as the Guardian Arkveld, especially the first time you fight him. But obviously the tempered version of him is probably a little bit harder than the Guardian Arkveld, but the 5-star normal Arkveld, I would say, is harder. So we're just going to keep him where he is. I think that's a good spot for him. Now, Rathian. Honestly, I think he's harder than all of these boys, but I don't think he's hard. I wouldn't consider him a hard fight, but I just think he spams that poison flip like he does in every game, but I think he spams it way more in this game than in any Monster Hunter I've played. You're going to get hit by that move. There's nothing you can do. You're getting hit by his tail swipe poison move at least one time every time you fight him. Even if you beat him in 3 minutes, in that 3 minutes, you're getting hit and you're going to be like, oh my God, Sekret, get over here right now. Get me to recover so I can pop that antidote. And anybody that poisons you, at least in my opinion, automatically becomes a little bit harder because if you're low health and you have to pop the antidote before the healing potion, that dude might just fly over and cook you. That is Rathian in a nutshell. I'm just going to put him right there. I don't think he's hard. I think he's more annoyingly difficult in one move only, and that is the tail swipe, which no matter what, I just get hit by it every time. I get hit by it at least one time every time I fight him. Kutku. You know what? No, we're going to keep him bottom of easy. Do I love the Kutku? Yes. Is he flail, flail, flail dead? Yes. He's literally just bing, 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 gone, done, dead. And you fight him when you have a ton of stuff later on in the end of the game, because he is showing up in the end game. You absolutely clean him up in seconds. I mean, he's probably going to hit you with his charge once, where he boom, 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 flying his head around, shooting fire out. But, I mean, he's so easy. He's so easy. You just kind of stay on him and you cook him so fast. At least in my personal opinion, he has always been an easy fight. The only reason that it takes him a little bit longer than some other ones is he's constantly running away from you. He's constantly just sprinting around, shooting fire around. So we're going to put him right here. Now, the Quamatrice, I don't exactly know how to say his name, I forget, but you know who I'm talking about. You know what? He's a blindfolded win for me. It is what it is. He's a blindfolded win for me. He is a blindfolded win for me. Every time I fight the Quamatrice, I am doing it because he's right outside of the Windward Plains camp, and I kill him in like 1 minute, and I'm just trying out a new weapon. Doesn't matter what element it is, I just try it out on him just because I want to feel good. That's what I do when I take it out on the Quamatrice. He's going right there, blindfolded win. He might be the easiest in the entire game. He's at least up there in terms of the easiest in the entire game. He is very, very easy. All right, next. Oh, man. Oh, man. Ooh, okay. This one's going to be a little bit weird. Now, fun fact, the Uthduna was the first monster that actually I carded on. I didn't triple card or anything like that, but I might have double carded, because I wasn't ready for the tsunami waves on the last part of this fight. And they destroyed me. And I died at the start because he was belly flopping on my ass 100 times. And you do have to break his little stuff that's flying around before you really start doing some big damage to him. I think that's one of the first bosses that kind of has a mechanic like that. Big boy Apex of the jungle or the forest. Man. But I don't think still, even with all that, he's harder than the Ray Dow, but he's a hard fight. He's definitely harder than any of these mid fights in my opinion. You fight him pretty early on in the game, so you might not have, really stuff ready to pop off on him, or I believe like a fire weapon. I believe he's weak against fire. Maybe it's thunder. I don't 100% remember. So we're going to put him at the bottom tier of hard. I don't think he's harder than the Ray Dow, but and I think you actually fight him before the Ray Dow because you kind of swap from the forest back to the plains over and over again early on in the game. So I think you fight him actually before you fight the Ray Dow, which is the apex of the first area. So I'm going to put him at hard, bottom of hard. I don't think he's harder than Ray Dow or Guardian Arkvel, definitely not. But he was the first one to faint my ass. And I don't think Ray Dow ever did. But I probably had better stuff and I was more prepared, whatever. Chupacabra, blindfolded win. I mean, he is the easiest in the game. He's the first guy you fight. Obviously, you literally learn focus strikes on him in the tutorial of the, longer tutorial, which is basically the base game before you get to the end game. So we're just going to put him here. He's the easiest guy in the entire game. He's so easy. The only thing he might hit you with is a little tongue move going on right there. So we're putting him right here. Nursilla, okay. This is a Spidey boy. This is the second Spidey boy you fight. Honestly, he was extremely easy for me. Like, extremely easy. I don't know if he's going to be harder for other people. They do have some weird frantic movements, but I don't think I can put him at mid. I think I got to put him at easy. Specifically for me with the longsword, I destroyed the Nursilla. Now, where is he in easy? He's harder than the Kutku. He might be easier than the Guma. I probably should switch the Guma and the Balahara too. I should probably switch the Dosha Guma and the Balahara, but we're going to keep it where it is for my reasons. But I'm going to put him right there. The spiders in general in this game, interesting because they're, new, kind of like the Octi boys. Unless I'm not remembering something correctly, but Nursilla was really easy for me. Didn't do anything that I was like shocked with. Second Spidey Boys, you're already kind of a bit used to the Spidey frantic movements. We're just going to keep it right there, and we're going to keep moving on. I absolutely whooped him. He never even got me once close to fainting ever. Rathalos. Oh, man. See, Rathalos for me, because I'm a longsword boy, and I don't use flash pods, even though I should be using flash pods, but I always forget that flash pods even exist in the game. We're going to put him up. I do think he's harder than Rathian. You know what? I know. I think he's easier than Rathian because he doesn't have that poison tail swipe move that I get hit with. I'm actually pretty good at dodging Rathalos' moves. And he has a really cool frantic flying moveset, but him flying around doesn't necessarily make him hard for me. It makes him actually easier because you can use just a flash pod really quickly while he's flying around for hours, knock him down, and do an insane amount of damage. So we're actually going to put him here. I do think he's harder than the Gravios because the movements are a little bit, like a lot faster, harder to dodge, but I don't mind. I don't mind dodging them. I don't think I'm getting hit very often against Rathalos, so I actually do kind of think the Rathian is a little bit easier. Now, this isn't the Guardian Rathalos you fight earlier on in the game. I actually think the Guardian version is easier. Maybe I'm insane with that, and maybe I'm just flat out wrong with that, but we're going to put him right there. Actually, let's just do the Guardian one right now because they're very similar. They're very similar to each other, and it's not like a big Arcveld boy. So we're just gonna, maybe the Guardian's harder. I don't know. They're right next to each other. They're right next to each other. You fight the Guardian one first and earlier on into the game, and he is like, okay. He's hitting me with some things every once in a while, but he's not very hard. Okay. Easiest of the easy. I mean, the Ron Popolo, bro. He's just annoying, but he's the easiest fight in the game. One of the easiest. He's not the easiest, but he's one of the easiest in the game. The Ron Popolo, bro. I hate the Ron Popolo. You're going to get poisoned, and it's going to be annoying, but he just doesn't do any damage, or at least in my opinion. I never got hit with anything crazy that was cooking me. You fight him a little bit like earlier on into the game as well, maybe middle way through that base game. Tempered version is extremely easy as well. Cook him in, you can cook him in just a couple minutes, especially late on in the game. You cook him really fast. I would probably put him harder than the Kutku because the Kutku's real easy too. In the Ron Popolo, you at least fight when you don't have all your endgame stuff. So we're going to put him right there. He's so easy. He's so easy. He's just kind of annoying because he does hit you with poison, and anybody with poison, in my opinion, is a little bit annoying because you have to leave the fight to take that antidote. And again, if they hit you while you're trying to take the longest drink of the antidote at all time without the speeding or whatever the hell it is, you can just get clipped. So, all right, we're going to put him right there. Anjanath, Fulgur Boy. Okay, Fulgur Boy. Nah, man, he was actually pretty easy for me. But he might hit you with some stuff. I'm going to put him around this area. Is he harder than the Ogadoran? No, I think he's actually probably a little bit easy. But I think he is harder than that Octi Boy Zulu. So we're going to put him right there. He's way harder than like the Iceborne, obviously, in Monster Hunter World. Way harder. But that expansion's way harder. Master Egg expansion, etc. So you fight him, obviously, in the base game, in the end game, pretty kind of early on in the end game for, I think, an optional quest. And he's not very hard. He might do some damage to you every once in a while with a big move, but he is pretty easy. He's honestly a lot easier than you think he's going to be because the last time you did fight him was in World, in Iceborne, which everything was way harder. So we're going to put him right there. Now, the Blanganga Boy, the Blango. I mean, let's be honest. He's extremely easy. I actually think he goes right here. He's extremely easy. He's another one that you fight in the end game. And I usually beat him in under 3 minutes now. Like, he's that easy. Granted, I do have a fully upgraded Ardean Fire Longsword, and I think Longsword's pretty easy on him. The only one he's going to kind of hit you with is that kind of weirdly timed slam where he jumps up and, you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to put him right there. You can cook him really fast. He is kind of annoying because 99.9% of the time you're fighting with his little boys with him as well. But I think you can probably avoid that by using one of those dung pods, right? And then they all kind of scatter. So, and you just kind of follow him. So we're going to put him right there. He is pretty easy. I do think he's easier than the Doshagoom, but I would say he does a little bit more damage, and you can get that frozen thing on you, then get clipped. So he is a little bit harder probably than the Nursilla. Wow, this list might be insane. People might disagree so heavily with this list. I apologize. I didn't really get the pulse of the Monster Hunter community before I'm doing this, but it's fun for me, so let's keep going. The Gypsy Boy! The Gypsy Boy! He's really easy, too. He's actually probably easier than the Nursilla, harder than the Popolo, and the Kutku. And I love the Gypsy. How do you not love the Gypsy? You might get hit here and there with a bok, 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 bok. He does the bok box. He got the egg. He doesn't have anything really crazy. You kind of just walk up, flail, 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 flail. He's dead. Just spin to win, cook him, and move on, honestly. But he's fun. I love the Gypsy. Everybody loves the Gypsy. Fan favorite Gypsy. So we're going to put him right down there at easy. He is pretty easy. Alright, now we got the Lala Barina, the actual first spider boy that you meet. Cool entrance. You're trying to save a dude from his web. He pops out. He has these little floating webs while you're fighting him. Very frantic movements. First of the new spider boys, like I mentioned, which is new to this franchise in this game, unless I'm forgetting something. So, Lala Barina is extremely easy. Extremely easy. Way easier than the intro to La Barina will make it seem like the La Barina is. Now, I'm going to put him right with the other Spider Boy. I would say he's probably a little bit harder than the other Spider Boy. I would say he is a little bit harder than the other Spider Boy because it's the first time you're fighting the Spider Boy, right? So we're going to throw him right there. So you still have to get used to those new movesets that you're used to by the time you fight Nursilla. But I mean, he's easy. His moves are kind of annoying to try to go and get to him, and you might get clipped with that paralysis. What am I talking about? I'm so used to saying these names wrong. I'm saying regular words wrong now. But the paralysis butt swipe or butt stab, you're going to probably get hit by that the first time you fight him, which is annoying, but it's nothing that your boy Palico won't come up and smack you right out of that paralysis anyway. So he does that overpoweredly quickly. So we're going to put him right there. And now we're getting to my least favorite monster in the entire game. I'm sorry for the Hirobami hate. Maybe I'll start liking him a little bit more as I keep fighting him. And as I use flash pods, like one of my previous commenters said, because I never do and I always forget about him. So that would make him a million times easier. But let's get to the Hirobamis. I do consider them, even with the hatred, not like the easiest. It's definitely not a blindfolded win type of easy, but I do think they're easy, and what makes them a little bit harder is that they do fly around. But again, you can use the flash pod to knock them down, which makes them a little bit easy. I think I'm going to put them right here. I think they're, you know what, no. We're going to put harder than Gypsaros, easier than the Spidey Boys, easier than the Blanganga boy. We're going to keep them right there. I think that's a good spot for them. They are going to hit you. You got the ice that they use, and you might have to fight multiple of them in one area because they all come in a pack, and if you don't use the large dung pod or you don't use the flash pods, it can make them a lot harder as well. So depending on how you fight them, it can be harder or easier. It is what it is. Now, the Zoshia. We're going to put them... Honestly, I thought the Zoshia was pretty easy. It just took a long time. We're going to put him right here. We're going to put him right here. I think he was easier than Arkveld when I fought him for the first time, the Guardian Arkveld. I think he was harder than the Raydao and the Uthduna for the most part. Maybe very similar to the Raydao. Obviously, this is the very last, basically, quote-unquote, secret boss you fight after you fight Arkveld at the end of the base game. And there's no high rank variety right now of the Zoshia, which is, by the way, the most insane thing ever. We have to fight this boss more than once. It's an awesome fight. It's an amazing fight. It's not GG's hard by any means. I think it's a little bit harder than Arkveld, or easier than Arkveld in my opinion. Oh, that's hard for me, but we're going to keep them right there. The Mewtwo, that's coming in April, so we'll throw them to the back. Oh, my potentially favorite fight in the entire game, the Jindahad. GG's. This, in my opinion, is one of the hardest fights in the entire game. Hands down, no question. This was the first monster that did actually make me faint multiple times. And I'm going off of when you fight him basically for the first time. Even in the high rank, it can be kind of hard. I would hop in multiplayer and people would be dying because you do have to really get used to his movesets. He is a big boy. If you're dual blade, you might cook him a lot easier when you're just going top to bottom like this. But he does have a one-shot mechanic too, where you have to pull down the shard and get behind of it. And if you don't know to do that when you first fight him, you're cooked. He's also scripted, so just in general, he's a longer fight. You have to break a lot of things off of him to do more damage, and he's going to regenerate those. There's a lot of things that do make this fight difficult. Now, again, I do want to say the GGs in this game are easier than GGs in other Monster Hunters. This isn't basically saying you're 100% going to die on this fight. I just think in terms of this game, he is up there as one of the hardest monsters, especially when you fight him online, even in the high rank. I think he can still wipe out your teammates if they don't necessarily know what they're doing, if they don't position correctly, because the insanely wide range of his attacks will hit you. You will get hit multiple times in this fight. And you might even die multiple times in this fight, like I did. Granted, he didn't triple cart me. He's never triple carted me, but he definitely triple carted my teammates when I play him in multiplayer after I beat him for the first time when he double carted me. So we're going to put him there. Gore Magala. Honestly, okay. Gore Magala, when you first fight him, is actually easier than you think. However, when you fight Gore Magala on 5 difficulty, in the tempered version of the Gore Magala, he's going to cook you. He is going to cook you because you're going to have that little status bar that builds up and just does all of your health immediately. He will still hit you for like 95% of your health. If you're not eating or doing something like that dumb, you're not beating this boss for the most part, unless you're obviously good at the game and you've fought him many times before. He's a hard fight. He is definitely a hard fight. Now, again, in the GG category, doesn't necessarily mean you're 100% going to die every time you fight him or the first time you fight him or anything like that. But if I'm looking and I'm putting him up as the max difficulty of this fight versus the max difficulty tempered versions of the other fights as well, he's up there in that GG category. Honestly, don't think he's harder than Jindahad, but I would put him very similar to Jindahad difficulty. And then, in the next one here, the Arkveld, the normal Arkveld, the last boss in the entire game, last boss of the end game, basically, 5 difficulty as well. He's going to be the hardest in the game. He's the only 8-star monster. He is ridiculously hard in comparison to all of these other monsters. Granted, even the top ones, like I've mentioned a million times, aren't necessarily quote-unquote hard in comparison to other Monster Hunters. However, he will cook you. He does a ton of damage. He's extremely fast. He has a lot more health than a lot of the other monsters in the game at that 5 difficulty tempered version of him. And in regards to that, I think he's just straight up the hardest fight in the game. Pretty hands down. I think he's even harder than, obviously, the Jindahad and the Gore Magala at their highest rank and highest difficulty versions. So we're going to put him right here. And if you kill him, you're going to be getting a ton of RDA materials. I'm just grinding him in endgame a lot of times for RDA materials in multiplayer, and my team gets wiped consistently against him. I will have people dying within the first 2 minutes of this fight sometimes. So he is definitely up there as the hardest, in my personal opinion. He is up there. That's a big boy. All right. Anjanath. Ooh. I think he's probably right here. But did I just say Anjanath? Ajarakanon. Ajarakan. That's not the Anjanath. This is the Anjanath. That is my bad. Ajarabababakanen. He's going to be right there. He's a very fun fight. He has that move where he spins around, jumps up in the air, and slams down. That can cook you for a lot of damage. Granted, it is very easy to dodge. At the end, when he's flinging around on those little steel bars and slamming down at you, he'll probably hit you once or twice with those. At the start of the fight, just in general, when he goes to the ground and does that side, like, fling up, and he's kind of, like, squirming around on the ground and flies up, that hits me all of the time. And it will do damage. But he is pretty easy. You can beat him pretty damn fast, especially when you have a specific element that is strong against him. It is really easy to just knock him over and kind of just stun lock him consistently. You can hit him with the forge at the start of the fight because that's a lot of times where he is. So there's a lot of things that can make that fight easier. But just in general, I think it's a mid-difficulty fight. You fight in the middle of the game. The tempered high difficulty version of him I don't think is necessarily harder based on when you fight him later on in the game as well. So we're just going to keep him there at mid. I think that's a good place for him. The Kongalala. The Kongalala. What else do I got to say about it? If you don't get hit by the pooper, you're not getting hit at all. He's extremely easy. He's not blindfolded easy, but he's extremely, extremely, extremely easy in my personal opinion. Actually very underwhelmingly easy. He's one of my favorite monsters in all of Monster Hunter. It's a lot of nostalgia to my PSP playing self way back when I was a kid. But I mean, he's easier than the Blanganga, and he's just going to poop you out, and it is what it is. He's just going to poop you out. And if you don't get hit by the poop, you're probably not going to get hit by him in general. Granted, he does have those little guys that run around with him that die in one hit, the normal Kongas. But again, you can split them up if you really want to, or you can just kill them immediately, specifically with the longsword. When I'm hitting R2, it's just going to kill them all anyway. So he's going to go right there. I think he's easier than all of these easy fights. And he dies so quickly, so absolutely quickly, and it's hard for him to hit you in general, at least in my personal opinion, aside from the pooper, which I usually get hit on purpose from that ability because I love that ability. You also fight him extremely early on in the game, right when you go to the forest area, and he's not necessarily any harder in the high rank version that he is in the early version based on the different armor and weapons that you're fighting him with in the early version versus the harder version. So we're going to throw him right there. Now, Guardian Doshiguma, not much to say about him. I think he's a little bit harder, maybe even actually a little bit easier because you probably have better stuff then, but I'm just going to put him a little bit harder than the Doshiguma here. Very easy fights. A couple differences there, a little bit faster maybe. He's got the Wilks, he's got the Wyvern Milks. I think the Guardians are generally a little bit harder. Not really anything crazy harder, except obviously the Arkveld, because I don't think there's a 5 difficulty version of the Guardian Arkveld. I think that's just the normal Arkveld. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm flipping these and switching these up, but that's where I'm going to keep it. Oh man, the new Udra for the last and definitely not least, the Black Flame himself. You know what? We're going to put him right here. Oh, man. Do I put him harder or easier? He's obviously... I think he's probably the easiest Apex in my opinion. Once you learn him. Because once you kind of learn those hitboxes, because he's an Octi boy, once you learn those hitboxes, you might just cook him so fast, it's not even funny. You know what? I'm going to put him at the top of mid. Because he's an Apex, I do got to put some respect on his name. When you do fight him early on in the game, he's a lot harder than you think he's going to be because you haven't fought an Octi boy and you got to get used to those movesets. Once you do, I think he's easier than some of these. But if you haven't yet, he's definitely harder. But I don't think he's hard. He never, ever, ever has fainted me a single time, even though I get knocked to lower health. You're obviously going to have to pop your cool drinks. You're going to get hit by him a lot, but not necessarily enough damage where it's going to kill you a lot of times, or really it hasn't for me specifically. Now, I kind of want to put some respect on his name by making him the bottom rank of hard, but I think he's going to be the top rank of mid because he's so much easier once you do, and this is kind of for everybody once you get used to his moveset, but because it's such a new moveset, it makes him kind of artificially harder at the start when you first fight him versus when you get used to him. In these other monsters, you've seen something similar, or you've fought, obviously, Rathians and things like that in previous games, which make them easier when you see him in this game. Granted, they have different moves a lot of times in the newer games, etc., but you know what I mean. So we're going to put him right there, and that is going to end off the tier list. We got 3 GGs. We got a couple blindfolded boys, which are obviously very early on fights, but they are blindfolded boys. You can cook them no problem without a question, and that is the tier list. Now, I haven't really seen what other people think about a lot of these fights in the Monster Hunter community. I might be wildly wrong here. Again, this is going to change based on what weapon you are using for some of these fights as well, because some fights are easier versus harder with whatever weapon that you're using. So if you disagree, let me know down in the comments what you disagree with, what you do agree with. If you like this video, please like the video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe for more content just like this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace!